Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Paul Kagavine. I'm the Adult Services Specialist here at the library, which means I am involved in most of the programs for adults here at the library, booking those. So this has been something that I have been wanting to do for a long time, have a ongoing series of educational presentations with our Hot Springs National Park. And my wife and I actually went for our anniversary back in November down to South Florida, and we did not spend much time in Miami at all, other than some horrible experiences at the airport and with the car rental. But other than that, we were just there mainly for the national parks. We went to Everglades and Biscayne, both two wonderful places which I recommend visiting if you ever have a chance. But when we got back from our trip, we still had that national park bug in our system, as I'm sure anyone that has been to other national parks or our own, you really feel that there's something special about national parks. And so we've got the little stamp passport book, and it's just become a hobby, almost an addiction of sorts, wanting to plan your itineraries for different national parks. But when we got back, first thing we did is, instead of taking a vacation from our vacation to rest, we went to our national park and went on a little guided tour. And James was actually there. He lived that tour. And that was really fun. And it re-inspired me. Oh, yeah, I had this idea, this plan to start this series. Now's a good time to reach out. And I got Kane's business card. And I remembered I'd actually met Kane before. He's done a presentation here a couple of years ago with the Historical Society. So Kane and I have been planning this for a few months. He had several probably a couple dozen topics of potential ideas and different presentations that we could have. But we're starting with the basics: Hot Springs National Park, its origins. And Kane's going to tell you a lot about how Hot Springs is so essential to how the national park system even launched. But most of you had mentioned, it sounds like everybody currently lives here or in the area. So we are really lucky to be able to have a national park right here in our own community. That's really special, not something everyone gets to experience. So I hope you learn a lot today from Kane. I'm going to let him introduce himself since he has such an impressive resume. So everybody, please give a warm welcome to Ranger Kane West.
Thank you all very much. Yeah, I've been in Hot Springs for about 3.5 years, and I've been wanting to do a speaker series for the community for about 3.25 years. And then I get an email out of the blue from Paul. He's like, hey, I'm with the library, which I already knew, and I would like to do something for parks. And it seemed like a perfect synergy moment to use and to use the support networks that exist locally to be able to have something for the community. We are a very busy park. We have a lot of programming that's for the general public. And I wanted us to start to emphasize local community outreach because we are sustained so vigorously by local community members. And so hopefully this becomes a platform for us to be able to speak directly with the people who call Hot Springs home and who visit here and who drink the water from here, et cetera, et cetera. And so as we go through the series, as it extends this year and into next year, the hope is to help reintroduce people to the park, have a more active dialogue, just a space where you can ask questions. So far, we've had about 4 very direct, hey, what can we do here questions, which is awesome. Good job, everybody. And I'm from Arkansas, and I'm from a state that usually people guffaw at. And I'm very proud of this state because I'm a local Arkansan, and that's what we do. Go Hogs. And so I know what it means to find something about which we can hang our hats on and be proud. And so part of the effort here is to talk about the wonderful history of Hot Springs, which we could never overemphasize enough within the history of the state and within the history of the country. And so that's our opportunity with these park chats, is to introduce the park, to continue to celebrate the park, and to see the wonderful work that happens between park and community. Now, Hot Springs and the national park idea. Hot Springs, a little bit of a different ethos. It does not look like the Everglades, believe it or not, but we are integral to the national park idea. But then the question is, well, what's the national park idea? And Wallace Stegner, I'm going to paraphrase him, he calls it wholly American and wholly democratic. And so parks, at least in his estimation, are democratic access to the lands and the resources and the stories of the United States. Right? That people should be able to go to the sacred places that have been set aside. These are also, according to the National Park founding document, they're supposed to be protected and preserved for present and future generations. Well, Hot Springs has been around for a long time. Does anybody actually know the birthday of Hot Springs as a national, or as a federal protected space? What you got?
It was April 20th, about 193 years ago.
That would be absolutely correct. I hope that you read it on our Facebook post to make sure our Facebook posts are getting out there. Does anybody know what day it is today? April 23rd. It's not a coincidence that we're trying to get this Park Chats presentation going within our birthday week. And this is National Park Week, so we are 193 years in the making, which makes us the future generations of our forebears. We are the deepest and longest held example of protecting a natural space for future generations. And so as we go through the presentation today, we'll see how Hot Springs fits into that idea of sacred landscapes protected for the people. And then there's an additional component of the national park story, and that national parks are chosen places. People have to choose parks. They are cultural value statements. Every single one of you, if you have a favorite park, it's because somebody who came before said that that park should exist. There was somebody in, 1915, 1916, who said that Rocky Mountain National Park should exist. And now it's other people, millions of people's favorite park to go to. Same with Yellowstone, the Smokies, Glacier, what have you. But that choosing has almost always been done by advocates. Almost all of those advocates are sort of local progenitors of the idea. And so as we go through the park's history today, I want you to listen for when the Hot Springs community has been the advocate for and the progenitor of the ideas of Hot Springs. All right, so we have these three ideas that national parks are these sacred landscapes protected for the future and protected by local advocates for generations that they will never meet. Now, every park does have a creation story. I also have my own park creation story. If you can't see, this is me faded against the background when I was at Yellowstone, but as a native Arkansan, I've been visiting Buffalo National Scenic River for years. It's over 50 years old. It's the first National Scenic River. I went to the Smokies back in the day. My dad worked at ASMS, now ASMSA, here in Hot Springs over 25 years ago. So I've been in the state's parks for decades. And I began my park service journey in 2012 as a volunteer at Rock Creek Park in Washington, D.C. And in the last going on 13 years, I've worked at 9 different parks, either as a volunteer or as a seasonal staff or as a permanent staff member. And I've come here to Hot Springs in the last 3.5 years. I'm the education coordinator, and for a few months now, I've been the acting interpretation, education, and visitor services volunteer manager, which means I have about 5 different hats that I wear at different points during the day. I put them on. It's very exciting, and I have to spin a wheel, my bingo wheel, to see which one I'm wearing at that moment. And today, I get to do my favorite thing, which is to talk to folks. Now, other parks have creation stories. There's sort of an apocryphal story of Yellowstone, if anybody recognizes the big, colorful stuff, which is that in the 1870s, a group of railroad advocates were at the Fire Hole and Gibson River confluence. Has anybody been to Yellowstone? All right, if you haven't, you should definitely go. This is near the west entrance, the West Yellowstone entrance, and that was apparently where the idea, the suggestion of a national park was first broached. We've since found out that this is probably not true. It's good for marketing, but Yellowstone has its creation story as a protected place. Anybody know where this
Yosemite Valley.
It is Yosemite Valley. You just come out of the window. What this does a good job of is zooming past the 200 people in the parking lot to take the same photo. Yosemite has its own creation story, but its most famous proponent is a guy named John with a nice Scottish accent, and he sort of advocates for the protection of parks. He says, going to the mountains is going home. One of you has a shirt that sounds very similar to this. And mountain parks and reservations, like Hot Springs Reservation, are useful not only as fountains of timber and irrigating rivers, but as fountains of life. So he's seeing parks as places for us to go rejuvenate in. Does anybody know where this locale is?
Joshua Tree.
Joshua Tree. We have some very, it feels like I'm in Jeopardy. Good, quick answers. What is Joshua Tree, Kane? The sunset looks even better on my screen than on this screen. And the idea that the deserts are worth protecting. And that was pushed by a woman named Minerva Hoyt. She's an early landscape female conservationist. And she's going to talk about the desert. And if you've ever sat and watched a desert sunset, this might sound familiar to you. The desert with its elusive beauty possessed me, and I constantly wished that I might find some way to preserve its natural beauty. And I once worked at Joshua Tree, and the main advocacy award that you can win is the Minerva Hoyt Award, right? So parks have origin stories. They're created by somebody, and they are left to the rest of us as our sort of our shared spaces. Hot Springs also has its own creation stories. Now, we won't focus on this today, but we have a natural history creation. It begins in the mountains around us, and then it comes out of the ground, super steaming. Right? So this is, if you ever get to the hot water cascade, it's usually like 10:30 in the morning, especially on a nice, cool, sunny day. And you just see that steam come up, and you understand why it's been called the Valley of the Vapors. We won't spend too much time on this today, but our next presentation in June, we'll talk more about this geological and hydrological story. But we are always here because of the water. The water is the beginning of everything. That's why Hot Springs was the beginning of it all. Now, it's pretty unusual to have hot springs in this neck of the woods. This is a map of all the hot springs in the lower 48. If you've ever lived in Alaska, you are not on this map. You're somewhere over there. But you have hot springs too. And they even claim a hot spring in just south of Tampa if you ever want to go. But most of our hot springs are west of the Rockies. If you go west of the Rockies, there's hot springs everywhere. It's like, boy, just another famous hot spring. It is really unusual to have hot springs east of the Rockies. We're much older mountains. Water isn't usually this hot. We're certainly the hottest water east of the Rockies. And it all stems from water falling into the mountains, going down super deep, as much as 8,000 feet, coming up a fault line. And I want to emphasize, has anybody ever heard the term of the recharge zone, the hot springs recharge zone? Sure. All right, if you haven't, that's what I want to emphasize in my next presentation. And if you are a local community member, if you're a member of Central Arkansas, what we can do in our present generations is help to protect and learn about the recharge zone. It's not just where the water comes out, it's where the water begins. The water begins outside of the park. Anybody here ever drive along Park Avenue to Highway 7 to the roundabout with 5? You're driving through the recharge zone. That's where the water begins. And if we can protect that region, then we protect not only the source, but where it emerges. And where it emerges is a really good photo space. If you ever want to put on a funny hat, you get to stand right here. It looks very similar to somebody else in it. So the springs, again, the water is the source, 40 plus springs, 143 degree water, on average between 90 and 150 degrees, and almost 750,000 gallons of water a day coming out of the ground. Right? So we are a water park. We also have human creation stories. Now, today we're going to focus on the park. So that's one of our creation stories, but the Caddo, seen here in the general Caddo territory, they've been here for 1,000 years. East Texas, northwestern Louisiana, eastern Oklahoma, basically all of western Arkansas is in traditional Caddo territory. If you drive to Royal, you've already driven past untold number of historic villages. The state of Texas is a Caddo term, is my understanding. So we are not going to be focusing on that deeper history. We're just going to focus on the last couple of centuries. But I'd love, whenever anybody drives up from Houston, I say, you've been driving through Caddo territory your entire trip. Now, This park story, the Federal Reserve, begins in 1832. Again, it's our 193rd birthday. I brought on a birthday hat when I came home. It doesn't say much in our founding legislation. It basically just protects 4 sections of land, about 4 square miles, around the springs, right where the springs come out. It doesn't say much about what to do with it. It just says that nobody can privately buy it. But this was the first time that a Federal Reserve had ever happened. And so we date back, again, 193 years. This is essentially what the town looked like. In this sketch, this is an 1834 sketch. But the idea of protecting hot springs begins before 1832. I love some of these quotes. A guy named Stephen Long, very important American cartographer and surveyor. He's going to come to Hot Springs. He's here on New Year's Day, 1818. He's got his party hat on, but it's a New Year's Day hat. He's got a little bit of a headache. He's got his little kazoo going on. But he's astonished by the local community members who he knows are taking care of everybody who's coming. So we know from his quotes that people are coming for health. We know from this quote on the top that they're coming from across the economic level. They're basically a bunch of people from Louisiana and Arkansas. But he says that the local community is equally as ready to supply the poor as the rich. People are coming here, they're looking for health. There's not much in the area to take care of them, but the local settlers realize that everyone is looking for health access. And then by the 1820s, this idea, and I think I know who, I think it was the wife of the homesteading family, who was the woman who was equally as ready to supply the poor as the rich. But that idea gets put into a legislative action. This is actually in 1821, the first Arkansas territorial legislative actions to be sent to Congress. This is one of the first things that people from the territory of Arkansas ever formally requested from Congress, which was that there should be a reservation of the land, because if that bountiful gift of nature should be monopolized by individuals, they may withhold their aid from the afflicted poor. So the idea of hot springs as a health space exists a dozen years prior to the creation of hot springs as a reservation. And the idea comes from local settlers, basically just on the other side of the Washita River and throughout the territory. So people who have also claimed Arkansas as home put this idea in the brainstem of the American public years prior to its actual protection. So again, we have this local effort. There's not hospitals here, but it is protected, and it's the first time that a natural resource has ever been protected by the federal government for free access to the people. It's never happened before. Now, Hot Springs is not the only place where this is an idea. This is a quote from a guy named George Catlin. He's in Oklahoma, and he identifies that same year, 1832, as a place for a nation's park, and he says it should contain man and beast and all the wild and freshness. So his idea of a national park is that it should be people chasing animals, basically like almost putting a fence around time immemorial. Doesn't quite happen. His history is a little bit off on who the Osage are, but he's looking for this idea again of a nation's park. And by the 1850s, there's new ideas of what parks should be. Has anybody here ever been to New York or seen the TV show Friends? Okay, perfect. So that's Central Park, aka Central Perk from but Central Park, the idea there is that it's supposed to be a green space for people living in urban spaces. That nature is supposed to be a place to get away from the city, to get away from life, to get away from the Miami airport and go to the Everglades. Right? It's a place away. And so this is also a park for the people, basically a giant playground pushed by a guy named Frederick Law Olmsted, who also is prominent in the creation of Yosemite. And he imagines Yosemite, he has this plan that it should have like carriage paths, that he's going to sort of design our experience with nature. And he wants it to be a pleasure park. The Yosemite Valley is first protected in the 1860s. It's a state park. So again, we're now expanding the idea of parks. really coming from an eastern idea of getting out of the city, now imposed on a western place where there's just a lot of land with less urbanization. And we move forward into the 1870s. Has anybody ever been to this view? So this is in Yellowstone. I always say, if you walk, you can walk to this view today, and people usually walk to it, and they start looking too early, and I say, don't do that. Keep your eyes closed, and then when you just let the space fully reveal itself to you. And in 1872, the first named national park comes into existence, is Yellowstone National Park. If you've ever been to the state of Wyoming, knew we were going to get you all in here, then you would have this giant scenic space, right? So parks is a scenic space, but also in the Yellowstone idea, the Yellowstone founding document is this phrase, for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. So by the 1870s, we've had decades of different visions of what parks should be, and they are for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. And the question in all cases is, who are the people and what should their benefit be? And in Yellowstone, it's a giant playground with your carriage rides in the forest. And in Hot Springs, it is a natural hospital for the benefit of all, at least in theory. But we have these twin ideas of we got to protect it, but we got to enjoy it. And who are the people who are supposed to enjoy it? In Hot Springs, by the 1860s, we have bathhouses, because these people didn't listen to the idea that the federal government owned the land, so they just built on it anyway, which is always super fun to do. And so because there was not a sense of permanent ownership, they all built sort of clapboard houses that could easily be destroyed, so they didn't put major investments in. And so they had bathhouses. They have just regular old wooden houses. They look like the TV show that I mentioned earlier that I can't say because it has a word in it that's probably not appropriate for YouTube from a ranger. And then not only are there bathhouses, but there are open springs. People are bathing in the creek itself. They're going to open pools, and it's too hot. They just put their feet in. So we have bathhouses and open springs. Right? So people here are not coming as a playground. They're coming for health. And the central spring of all of this is the Row Hole. Has anybody ever heard of the Row Hole? It should be perhaps our most famous story because it encapsulates most of what the park would become for the next 70 years. So the Row Hole is on Hot Springs Mountain, just behind the bathhouses. Today, there's nothing there, it's just a little crater, a little pit. In the 1870s, it was perhaps the most famous healing spring, certainly in Hot Springs, if not in the country. The people who would go there had either been denied care from somewhere else, the care had been inadequate, and they're coming to Hot Springs as their last hope. They have no more dollars left once they get here. They can't go to one of the bathhouses. They've heard about the spring. The idea is that the spring, the water at the spring source was the most efficacious. And if you were visiting, I don't know if you worked for a newspaper, I don't know if anybody of you have ever worked for the newspaper, but you would record 3 parts of your visit. Number 1, you'd go to a hotel. Number 2, you would go to a bathhouse. And number 3, you would go walk up the hillside to see the sickest people in the United States being healed by a spring protected by the United States. And it's like people are gawking at the sick folk, but it also sort of proves the idea that Hot Springs water is healing. Right? Because these are the sickest people, and some of them are actually getting healed. They have been healed nowhere else. And there's going to be a debate over what should happen to Row Hole by the 1870s. Because if you're a bathhouse owner, you don't want it to exist. And if you are somebody who's coming from 1,000 miles away to get better, you do want it to exist. And so this question of should it exist, should it not exist, is going to fill the nation's newspapers for months. We'll read a couple of quotes. Hopefully they'll show up on our screen. There are local citizen petitions. Remember this idea of local advocacy. And they're going to say, permit the healing waters of Hot Springs to be made available for every citizen who chooses to visit our city, be he black or white. All right. What is the park for? It's for healing. For whom is it? It's for everyone across the racial spectrum, the major dividing line of that time. Bathhouse owners are also going to petition the federal government. And they're going to say, cause these miserable shanties to be torn down and those filthy pools be filled up under the doctrine of the greatest good for the greatest number. So on the opposite side, for whom are the baths, and for whom are they, and how should they be used? Well, they should be bathhouses, and they should not be for people who get things really nasty and dirty. Right? So this question of for whom is the park, and how are people supposed to use this limited medical resource? I'll fast forward. What do you think happens? A lot of stuff. Again, it's dictated through the papers. It's dictated through Congress. And one of the first defining legislations about this park comes in 1878. And Congress passes down a law that says the superintendent shall provide and maintain a sufficient number of free baths for the use of the indigent. Free baths for the indigent. It's defining for whom the park is and how they should use it. And if you had told that family 60 years beforehand what Congress would say, they would be like, oh yeah, that's what we've been doing 2 generations prior to this. So that local advocacy is still in process, even at the highest levels of the United States. There's other context, and if you want to come to a November presentation for the Garland County Historical Society, I'll talk about more context for this. But if you don't, here it is. And so as a result of that debate on Hot Springs Hillside between who should have access to the water, the entire legacy of the springs is going to transform. And so not only will Hot Springs develop a whole series of incredibly beautiful and valuable bathhouses along Bathhouse Row, there will also be a government-free bathhouse that operates in Hot Springs from 1878 to 1952. It's the first time that had ever happened in the history of the United States, but if you're from Wyoming, Thermopolis, Wyoming has a free bathhouse modeled off of Hot Springs. If you're from New York, Saratoga Springs takes this same model. And so there is a federal free bathhouse for the medical poor in Hot Springs. So that means part of the people who should be able to come to their park is essentially, theoretically, everyone. Not only that, but we're adding another constituency. Has anybody ever seen this or know what this building is? It's the Army-Navy General Hospital, built in the 1880s. It's the oldest all-branch military hospital in the history of the United States. It's the precursor to Walter Reed Medical Center, sort of that same ethos. And so we are also providing medical bathing waters for active and veteran soldiers. That's an incredible amount of communities. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about one of the movers and shakers in Hot Springs, that local community. Is a guy named Samuel Fordyce. He's going to be involved in getting an Army-Navy hospital. He's involved in developing some of the bathhouses. Today we work out of his named bathhouse. Our connection to the state of Alabama is that he lived there for a little bit before he left. So if anybody wants to go from Birmingham to Hot Springs, it's a very historically accurate travel. He also helped to develop the first Arlington hotels. So we do have, again, named local advocates. And so when you see this picture, which is one of my favorite of early Hot Springs from the 1880s, it makes you sit around a little bit, because obviously we have the hotels and the bathhouses. We have the government-free bathhouse. We have the Army-Navy General Hospital. This is a sacred landscape of health for the people of the United States, protected by the people of the United States, but specifically protected by local community members here in Hot Springs who are trying to set aside a healing place for the nation. It's a resort town, yes, but it's also constructed and advocated that it should be a place of health for everyone. With public-private bathhouses, government-free bathhouse, military houses. And I'm not saying it, but Charles Cutter said it's the world's greatest health resort. It's pretty cool. Now, what is the health resort supposed to do? It is health and wellness. It's got medical bathing, medical massage, fitness, lifestyle, and leisure. So Hot Springs will emerge by the 1880s as the nation's healing place. It's going to have crazy accoutrement. It's based on hydrotherapy, right? So water-based treatment. And there's almost a local Hot Springs development of ideas. So there's a Hot Springs treatment. There's physical culture, the rise of physical fitness in the United States. See some of its emergence here in Hot Springs. This guy totally buys into the whole thing. You know, the trick when you give your own presentation, you get to put your own photos into there. Could have put some of our former seasonal rangers in there. I said, James, you look too much like me, so I'm just going to put myself. The landscape of Hot Springs. Has anybody ever here walked on the promenade? All right, you're walking on a landscape of health. It's probably one of the most designed and redesigned places in the National Park Service about what a park should be and how we should use landscapes for health.
I proposed on the promenade. That's how special it is.
Go back. Woo, that's amazing. Congratulations. All right, I don't think you can get more national parky than that. Did it work?
Well.
All right, go us. Yes, national parks, bringing people together. Congratulations.
That's true.
And so national parks, or this park, is meant to rejuvenate Americans' health. I mean, look at this guy. He's struggling. Oh, gee. This is what my calf feels like. Right? And he took 21 baths, 3 weeks. Look at him now. He is ready to go back to the office. His vacation is done. He wants to start clicking at that calculator. Right, so the park rejuvenates Americans from their stay here to return to be productive citizens. And local advocates are making sure that there are also Black-owned bathhouses. We are a place for everyone as long as there have been advocates for that. And so there have been as many as 3 Black-owned bathhouses. You can read articles about them in the Record, the Garland County Historical Society's newspaper. One of the authors of one of those articles is here in the room with us. And there was even, as we see here, a U.S. Public Health Service, a free federal medical clinic here in Hot Springs for decades. This is pushing the boundaries of health access in the United States. Again, because the people have come here, they've demanded that need for health, and local residents then provide that. And so again, we return to that idea of for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. And here in Hot Springs, we've answered that question, that it is America's health and pleasure resort. And you get to hang out with cool togas if you want. Uncle Sam and the locals bathe the world in Hot Springs. There is tremendous, so this is a federal managed space, but also the people who are doing the bathing, they are local constituents. My neighborhood that I live in, I've Google mapped the location of all the bath attendants who worked in Hot Springs. My whole neighborhood was basically constructed by bath attendants. If you live, I don't know, on Whittington Avenue, that neighborhood was full of people who were either owners of Black-owned bathhouses or Black bath attendants of the bathhouses on Bathhouse Row. The community was who was bathing the world. I know it says Uncle Sam, and Uncle Sam is there, and there's this direct correlation. The people of Hot Springs are very proud of that federal presence. It's this local federal integration that's really remarkable, right? So local advocates are proud of the federal ownership of the reservation, but local advocates are also the healers of the nation. And something else is also happening. People around the country by the late 1800s, early 1900s, they love to go on vacation. We're talking racetracks. We're talking casinos and gambling. We're talking Coney Island. We're talking Nathan's Hot Dogs. Right? Nathan's Hot Dogs. What's happening in Hot Springs? We got racetracks too. We got golf, one of the oldest golf courses west of the Mississippi. We got baseball. And to top it all off, we got alligators, right? So the city is trying to entertain the people who are here. And so the development of early travel, of sort of recreation in the United States is coming to Hot Springs. And so we have a bathhouse row in a whole city. It does not look like Yellowstone. I will admit that. But if national parks are democratic access to public lands, it's one of my favorite charts. I show it every time. People love us. The most visited park in the country through the 1920s, the Spritz. It's the Valley of the Vapors. A third of all visitors to the National Park Service the year that we are established are coming to Hot Springs. The only reason that we dropped to second or third is that there was a superintendent. This is what I've been told by another ranger. There was a superintendent at a place called Rocky Mountain National Park who was jealous that we were the most visited, and so he asked that the counting numbers be changed. But it's okay. Rocky Mountain's also cool. Right, so Hot Springs is meeting the needs of the people, and the people are coming here. Right, we exist because the people demand health, and Hot Springs provides it. Now, Hot Springs is always a little bit of a stepchild to other national parks. You can see national park advocates trying to figure out how to bring Hot Springs into the national park story. This is basically from the origins of the park, that Hot Springs is the oldest national park, having received that status in 1832, 40 years before the wonders of the Yellowstone inspired Congress with the idea of scenery as a national asset. So a lot of parks will take on the Yellowstone model, which is really that it looks good on Instagram or whatever like landscape painter that you have traveling with you to do all the painting work while you enjoy it. Right, so scenery becomes a major element of national parks, but here in Hot Springs, it's a place of healing. Right, so you can see this question of, all right, parks are popular, but for major advocates of parks, where does Hot Springs fit in? But we will always be able to tout that basically the father of the National Park Service, Stephen Mather, loved Hot Springs. In his 1920 director's report, he's going to really show that Hot Springs is part of the national park idea, even if it's a little bit different. He says it's the great national spa. It's a pleasure park, going back to the ideas of pleasure carriages in Yosemite. It's a pleasure park as well as a health resort. It is the duty of the government to furnish to the poor unfortunates who seek the health-giving waters of the reservation as their last resort. He's also building on the government-free bathhouse. This is a very strange idea. And not only that, but we consider Hot Springs Reservation a park and constantly speak of it as such. So when people come into Hot Springs and they say, why is this a national park? I should just give them the entirety of that 100-page 1920s director's report, or I could just give them these snippets. All right, so we have this question of the national park idea, and Hot Springs is firmly in it because Hot Springs is what the people want in many ways. People are coming here in droves, and the city is providing the nation's health resort. We're just going to go through some highlight photos from the golden years, basically from the 1880s to like the 1930s, 1940s. We got people in cool hats, fur hats, people sitting next to wooden cottages over in Happy Hollow or tile. Who's from the Midwest? You said Iowa. But in Midwest, this is Midwest tile. It's from Ohio. You can go in and recreate this today in the Fordyce. If you have your own silk dress, feel free to show up. We had these natural springs, open springs. So if you see the display spring behind the Fordyce and Maurice bathhouse, people have been randomly staring at it for a long time. You can go drink water from one of the water fountains. This fountain still exists. The Noble Fountain has just been moved about 50 yards away from that location. And as this says, this is one of the fountains in Hot Springs Park, Arkansas. And the people loved it. These bathhouses were full. We're talking 100,000 people a year in each of the bathhouses. That's 225 people a day on average in these bathhouses, in each one of them. We're providing 1 million baths a year. We've said that we only crossed 1 million baths one time, but I don't think that statistic includes the government-free bathhouse, which was almost every year by far the most visited of the bathhouses. So we probably exceeded 1 million baths on a number of occasions. People love Hot Springs. And I like this because it's an interior shot of the Imperial Bathhouse, which no longer exists and is a popular space for one of our local Facebook fan club groups to say, I wish I could have gone in there. Well, this is your chance to look inside the Imperial Bathhouse. And so Hot Springs is going to expand rapidly. We go from the palace to an updated palace to this cool new Italianate Mediterranean style bathhouse, to a modern vision of that same bathhouse, right? So we've expanded over time. The popularity of this place is incredible. Fires, floods, world wars, other world wars, major health outbreaks, economic depressions, and Hot Springs returns year after year, time after time, time after time to maintain itself as the nation's health resort, as healing the people. It's incredible. And in fact, I kind of want to get some of y'all's memories. People are coming here from FDR to brand new Army Navy hospitals to the Levi Hospital, which is the first Jewish hospital for arthritis and blood disease. I want to hear 3 ideas from y'all. What are some of y'all's earliest memories of Hot Springs and what it has had? Gambling, fantastic. Gambling did not make Hot Springs, but they're here for 3 weeks and they have to have something to do, so they go to the gambling halls.
How about ostrich rides?
Ostrich rides, yes. There was one famous, super famous ostrich. I almost put him in this picture, but I did not. But if you're going to entertain people, you got to give them something to ride on. I feel like the Swiss Family Robinson.
Gangsters.
Gangsters, right? So we emphasize that story a lot today. And some people might even say that gangsters built Hot Springs. All the bathhouses existed prior to the arrival of a guy named Al. So that's like a later generation. But in terms of our living memory, the gangsters are sort of the oldest part of our living memory. But they're really version, at this point, from what we've seen, 4 or 5, generation 4 or 5 of Hot Springs. But it definitely sits in the cultural memory today. And so this park has had so many elements to it, so many different generations, and then something happens. Miracle drugs. And apparently Captain America. And changes in biomedical research, especially during the World War II period, are going to make places like Hot Springs obsolete. Why come to Hot Springs for 3 weeks when you can get better in 3 hours with, it's a hyperbole, penicillin or ibuprofen or something like that? And we will see that the thing that knocks out Hot Springs isn't the fires, isn't the floods, it's the miracle drugs. And so these are our number of baths recorded, and all through their 19 teens and 20s and 30s, there's a bounce back, there's a bounce back, there's a bounce back. And we hit our height in 1947, and it becomes a downhill roller coaster basically every year after that into the 1980s and 1990s. In fact, the government-free bathhouse closes in 1952. The Fordyce bathhouse closes in 1960, or the Army Navy Hospital transfers in 1960. The Fordyce closes in 1962, right? So these things are happening. I know that what y'all are mentioning about gambling continues, but the decline happens very clearly in the results of post-World War II changes in medicine and recreation. That's going to create a tremendous change in the park itself. People who used to hang out in cool togas are now visiting museums. And I want to give a shout out really quick. The fact that we even have a museum is due to the work of the Friends of Hot Springs National Park. It's our advocacy arm. It's our sort of fundraising arm for the park, right? These bathhouses were restored because of local advocacy, both from the congressional delegation and from local folks. The park has always found its footing again because of the work of local supporters. So shout out Friends of Hot Springs National Park. They're going to be a major supporter of this series. That cool gymnasium where I was doing this, that's now a photo op. It's a place where you see how people used to do exercise. We don't have to do any exercise in the building anymore. No exercise allowed. Except for, again, that's why I don't run. One of our former attendants goes from being a bath attendant to a park ranger, a place of the present to a place of the past. People used to come for healing, but now they're coming for recreation. And yet, something is changing. So this is Hot Springs in 1896. This is the new reservation. We have the cool Maurice bathhouse. This is Hot Springs from a year ago, same place. It's getting crowded. We have been averaging about 2.5 million visitors a year for the last 4 years. We're as busy as we have ever been. I have not been able to find, I've looked around to see other popular tourist spots in the state. I have not found any place that draws in more annual visitors as a single location than Hot Springs National Park. It seems to be one of, if not the biggest tourist draw in the state. I think that's pretty remarkable, especially because it sounds surprising, I would argue. Again, one of the most visited parks in the country. And if you were here a year ago, downtown Hot Springs in front of the bathhouses was packed. Tens of thousands of people did come to Hot Springs for the eclipse. It was amazing. Some of y'all were volunteers at that thing. We had one of the most successful national park, I would argue, presentations. We won NASA awards for our community outreach. We reached tens of thousands, or about 7,000 students, tens of thousands of visitors. The day before the eclipse was the busiest day in the history of the Fordyce Visitor Center by double. Right? So people were coming to their national park, their public lands to experience this event all together. We had cool photos from it as well. I hope that y'all got to enjoy it. And so the park continues to be a driver of visitors to this region of the Ouachita Mountains, whether we know it or not. And there are still local investments in this place. So here's that really cool photo from the 1880s, and I said, imagine this as the nation's healing place, protected, but also pushed by local advocates for the people. Today we have bathhouses that are being rejuvenated in conference with the national park, but led by, again, local stewards. We have the Buckstaff, which has been the oldest concessionaire in the National Park Service, open since 1912. We have restaurants and hotels that sort of reimagine what these buildings should be, right? So these are local folks who are investing in their city, their community, and it just happens to be that the community is so correlated with the park itself. We have new bathhouses that are opening up, right? So this is this architectural beauty, we know that, but again, it all goes back to the water. And if we protect the water and we honor the water, we continue as a community to be able to survive downturns and fires and floods and renew ourselves again. So people have been coming for the water. Remember, this gives you the instructions: drink the hot water in Hot Springs. This is Maggie Lane Walker, one of the most famous women of the early 20th century, drinking the water. So I ask you all, who here regularly goes to their park to drink the water? We are one of that connection, that resource connection between the local community and the park is pretty profound. I don't know if it's unprecedented in the Park Service, but I know of very few communities that are so entwined with the resource protected by their local national park. And I see people every day and I ask their water stories. Who told you about it? How long have you been doing this? Why do you drink the water? Why do you drink this one and not the one at Happy Hollow? It's too far away at Happy Hollow, right? People have water, they're connected to this place. And they usually say, it's been decades. My grandmother, I drive from Texas once a month. Somebody apparently drives from Wisconsin or Michigan a couple of times. It's an amazing story that always draws back to the water. We still maintain that democratic access to a natural resource and American stories for present and future generations. So thank you all very much for making Hot Springs your park. Right? It's here because you have chosen it to be here, or your forebears did, and you've decided to keep it going. So thank you all very much for the presentation. I think it's now time for a Q&A, but otherwise, yeah, thank you. Yes?
One of your earlier slides, like the visitor rate for each year. What happened in 1923 that
Oh, yeah, there was that 1 year.
zero visitors?
I'm not sure. I'd have to go through the specific.
Oh, in 1990.
Yeah, I think somebody fell asleep or pressed delete too much is my actual guess. But that is, we have visitor statistics dating back to the 1890s. So Visit Hot Springs is part of a long line of people trying to judge and assess how many people come to Hot Springs.
how is the count maintained? I mean, where is it counted? Is it counted at the,
Yeah, we have,
since there's no entrance like there is in a lot of other,
this is specifically paid baths.
okay.
And so they had to give bath tickets. So these are privately operated and owned, but sort of federally overseen. So all the bath tickets would get sent in, and that's federal dollars, that's federal revenues. And so every year the superintendent would send in a superintendent's report. And so you'll see, and they'll break it down by park, and they'll say if there was any half baths or like discounted baths. So the statistics are very fun if somebody wants to compile those, which luckily somebody already did for us. So, yeah.
Is, Hell's Half Acre, is that on that national park property?
Sure. So Indian Mountain, parts of Indian Mountain are within the national park boundaries. So national parks protect a variety of resources, from the natural to the historic. That's how we normally, and the cultural, that's how we normally divide them up. But we have a responsibility to be able to protect places that date back eons.
Do you occasionally have hikes to Hell's Half Acre?
No, there's no public access up there, just out of deference to and protection of the cultural stories up there. Yes, ma'am.
I recently saw a site called 1,000 Springs. It's kind of like, it's off the new scenic byway out by, like going towards Five, like you were saying, the roundabout. I think it's off Mill Creek Road. Are you familiar with it?
I am. I'm less familiar with it than probably a few other people in the room, but you would see articles dating back to the 1880s and 1890s that would call the Hot Springs area one of the most spring-rich areas in the country. So this is a park that is part of a larger community that has numerous, both famous and locally known springs. I could name off some locations, and that's mainly due to the faulting and the geology of the rocks. And then 1,000 Springs being one of those. And I can't comment on its current conditions, but it is part of that sort of fractured geology in the area that brings these waters down from way deep to the surface. And so Happy Hollow Springs here in the park, its age is between 20 and 100 years old. The Hot Springs water is about 4,400 years old. And so there are water systems that are all under our feet right now, of varying ages, from months to weeks to months to years to decades to centuries to millennia. Pretty special. Yes, sir.
So I think the things that our park, of course, are most known for are the water and the bathhouses, but people often forget that it also includes the mountains and the trails. Were those there from the beginning?
Sort of. So the 4 sections of land, that 4 square acres, it covered a lot of the current mountain areas. It also covered areas of Woodington Park and downtown. And the other side of the street that's not federal, in the 1870s, the park shrinks to basically just the slopes of Hot Springs Mountain. And then in the 1920s, it expanded again. And there's various reasons for that. People's vision of what a park should be changes over time. As one of the questions I ask on my tours is, who here loves to go to parks to walk in the woods with just raw wilderness, meaning you and the bears and whoever you're leaving for the bears as bait. And that signifies a cultural change in what people are looking for in parks. And Hot Springs responds to that cultural change. It's going to add the mountains, both for landscape preservation, to protect the water source, but also because people just like to walk around in the woods and have carriage rides. And so it's really, the current shape is really about a century ago. For instance, our Gulfport Gorge Campground is turning 101 years old this year. Doesn't look a day over 100, and it looks a lot younger than that. So please go out and visit your Gulfport Gorge Campground. So yeah, so this Hot Springs, I've argued, has transformed. If parks are cultural value statements and they are chosen, Hot Springs has changed according to cultural value statements as much as or more than almost every other park in the country. Because we're the oldest, people try to figure out what this whole thing means. And so when you're walking on this landscape, when you're proposing on this landscape, when you're driving on this landscape, these are new ideas of different generations who are leaving to us today that sense of protection and awe and wonder. Yeah.
Do you have any plans to cover Whittington Park and all the things that have transitioned in that area? There's been so many things over the years.
I don't currently, but if Paul writes down that note, if I write down that note, maybe it'll be a future program.
There's a lake there.
Yeah, it's been a lot of different
It's
ideas.
part of the reserve. I know I get a homestead credit because of that.
Yeah.
So,
And so, again, like you could look at from Indian Mountain to Whittington Avenue to all these areas being changed and rechanged, and we're the oldest park and people are doing things for the first time. What should it look like? Should it look like Coney Island? I don't know. And so we can put that on a future topic for sure. Yes, sir.
There are hot springs goes right underneath there, that creek, and it's in the tunnel.
Yeah.
Who maintains that?
I'm actually not sure because I hear a lot of different answers, so I don't want to get it wrong, but I know the city will go down there, I know that we go down there, and I don't know who has which jurisdiction over what. I don't want to. It's a partnership. And it's a partnership. Which, yeah, but I don't want to specify and get it wrong for the newspaper to tell me that I got it.
Were they concerned about the flooding when all this was going on down through there?
yes.
Sure. So that's an 1880s construction, and it's been repaired at different times. And it was built for like 20-year floods, as if they had measured that back in the day. And so it has been a source of awareness about its capacities and sometimes its limited capacities since the 1880s.
That's pretty hollow down through there. How far down from the road is actually?
I've got to be, it's several feet depending on the location. Yeah.
I know I saw the volume of hot water that comes out every day. How much of it goes into the creek versus is used in bathhouses?
Sure. It depends. Use of the hot water publicly and ecologically changes over time. And so management plans have to adjust for that combined use, right? So we have to protect the water for future generations. We also have ecological goals and requirements for management. And we also have this historical quality of water use. And so we can measure that, but it changes seasonally and it changes sometimes daily.
That when it's cold, you can see the steam coming out of the drains that are along that Arctic Park.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Yeah. So some of it, you can hear it. Some of it's going into the creek right there.
Yeah. Right. So we have not only a cultural use, but the springs have been used for a very long time, as evidenced by that wonderful photo that I don't know how many people have gotten to see, which I think is really cool. Which is, no, I should not have gone back this far. There's too many things to go back, but I promise that it exists right here. Boom. There we go. Went too far back. But there is a story from the 1820s that people weren't bathing in the springs. They were too hot. And this guy from Louisiana comes out, he gets his bear furs or whatever, bear rugs, and he lays them down in the creek, probably down below where the Lamar is today, and sets out his bear rugs overnight, and he lays in the water, and just like, that's how he enjoys, because it's cooled off by then. So the water has been flowing into that creek for a long time. Yeah.
All right, because we're kind of near that slide already. The Rowell Hole, you mentioned it being basically all dried up or filled in by now. What happened to it?
The writer of this article put a pipe into it so he could get the water. And then a couple of years later, to have greater access to the water, there was dynamiting on the hillside. Turns out if you have a highly fractured mountainside hydrology and then you blow it up, you're going to change water flow. And so by the early 1900s, the scientific reports on the springs said that it was almost completely dried up. Yeah, and its time was up. It's a good beat moment. So they did protect the springs. I always say they protected the springs. It's no longer potentially filthy and dirty because it no longer exists. So they can achieve their own means. So yes.
What do you plan to do for Hot Springs National Park?
We do as much as we can with all the energy that we can muster. This week is National Park Week, and so we've been able to get out to the community. This is our third community event this week, and so it's been. And then I guess the way that we celebrated our birthday on April 20th was by protecting some of the visitors who had come in during a tornado warning. And so that's a very memorable way to spend your birthday. But our rangers who are on site were able to do a wonderful job of keeping those people safe and protected as the natural forces that have, again, created this park over the years were once again in the area.
How much of the Northwoods Trails is national park versus the city owning it, or is that?
The Northwood Trail System proper does not reside within the national park. We have one access trail on Pullman, but in general, Northwoods is a private/city conglomeration. I'm looking for a nod. Yes. So, but it does show that people return to Hot Springs, redefine its recreational opportunities. But people have been riding donkeys through the hills of Hot Springs for a very long time. We have pictures of the gangsters going on donkey rides on the Arkansas Traveler, sometimes on bull ride, like bulls pulling carts. And today, no donkeys, yes bicycles. Yeah.
Who owns the Army Hospital?
That property has been, the property ownership has been sort of jockeyed about. People trying to figure out what the chain of ownership command is. And there's been recent legislation. I'd actually point you to recent Sentinel Record and Arkansas Democrat Gazette articles, or just state level newspapers that will have more clarity on that than I specifically know, because there's the caveats and such.
Well, you're concerned that whoever takes that on might jeopardize some of the mountains coming down through there if they start working the land.
Sure. So the park, especially the park superintendent, is, we're in the forever business. And so we have to keep awareness of potential issues with water quality, with the landscape itself. So anything that's of that long-term concern, that ecological concern, is always within the management goals, considerations.
Too bad you can't take that thing over and do something with it. Big building.
Yeah, big building. But it just shows that it's a frequent question that I get asked, right? Because the local community is determined to help preserve the landscapes, the resources, and the history of this place. And so, like, the local interest, your question, the repeated questions.
It's a beautiful building.
Yeah.
And the tile and the marble inside. It's a beautiful building.
Yeah.
Shame to shame. Of course, they did have the culture where they had classes in there, and that was really marvelous that was being done. Some of the things they're teaching, the automobile repair, and it had a print shop in there.
Yeah.
And I was a printer, and they didn't even know how to turn that press on.
Yeah.
A German press called Heidelberg, and I went in there and told them how to turn it on, but they were teaching printing, and that was a good thing. And having that disappear like that.
Yeah. No, I'll say that the generations of Hot Springs have come, gone, revitalized, fallen away, but always returned. And so I have no doubts that there will be. I know that there will be considered federal and local interests and efforts, and state and county efforts to continue to keep Hot Springs and its historical resources and its natural resources protected for the long term in ways that it seem feasible. Yeah.
So is that hospital on national park property?
At this point, we're getting into questions that I'm not totally sure on, and so I can't answer too many of the specifics because I'm not privy to them.
So what are the parameters of the park? I know you said Gulf Gorge,
Mm-hmm.
and then part of Central Avenue that has the bathhouses on it.
Right, so 5,500 acres. I usually describe, well, just say it. It feels good, but nobody knows what that means. I always usually say this side of the bathhouse row area, and then if there's mountains with trees, it's a good chance it's in the park, especially in the sort of the loop-de-loop-de that's behind us. Some people describe it as a giant donut. I describe it as a croissant to reach back to some of our French heritage. So we'll go with croissant since I get to say it.
Yeah, I've worked at ACTI for 11 years in the old Army Navy hospital, and it is part of the national park and everything. And they actually have spring water that came up into the building on the first floor. The drinking fountain was spring water, and also the physical therapy department that they had on the first floor used spring water as well.
Yeah, so there's been lots of, like I said, I can't confirm or deny any of the specifics because I know that it's complex and complicated, but it just, again, it shows how integral healing and the water and the buildings and the landscape and the people who've come here for some sort of rejuvenation and hope sort of use the area for years.
That's a good segue into some news about one of the other buildings, one of the bathhouses. I guess it'd be a new concessioner for you guys, the Ozark.
Yeah, so we are in a place that continues to revitalize itself, and we have a lot of history we have to go through to click through. But the buildings on Bathhouse Row are currently on iteration 2, 3, 4, and we will pretty soon have another bathhouse sort of in new use. And so there's going to be a new concessionaire in the Ozark, and they have signs outside, so go check out the Mystic Ozark.
Is it a holding pond before it goes to the fountain?
It's just a complicated hydrological system with many miles of pipes and large, we have the cooling station and such. So the the hydro system is going to capture the water at the spring heads and then transfer it eventually into the bathhouses. Clean, consistent, and hot is.
It can't come out 140 degrees filling your containers, right?
It just depends on, what hot water you want. So the fact that it's, again, clean, consistent, and warm, or in the case of Happy Hollow and Whittington, cold, is pretty remarkable. So we have a really wonderful maintenance team, our water operators, who just keep this thing that we take for granted working all the time, which is pretty awesome. And I do want to give a shout out. Some of our volunteers are in here. If anybody else wants to volunteer in the park or do something that helps to tell the story, please feel free to do so. So shout out to these folks in this row, but also, and the Cagrin Greens have been.
That was real off. Okay,
have been helpful in the park as well. So thank you all very much for coming out today. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I appreciate you all being so central to the story here. And please keep on drinking your water.
And the next program is Wednesday, June 25th, and it's
going to be more of the hydrology of the water. It's going to be the water story of Hot Springs writ large.
Did you say June 25th?
Yes,
Yes.
Fourth Wednesday
every
other month.
June
4th Wednesday. June.
So this is every other